Have you ever wanted to feel superhuman? If you answered yes, then this video might put you on the right path to do just that. Most people are stuck at the absolute basics. And to them, showing them one of the things I'm going to show you in this video will be like discovering fire for the first time. And I'm not just going to be speaking about mindset and theory. I'm going to show you some hands-on AI tricks and tips that you can use by the end of this video to go to the next level. And if you watch till the end of the video, you'll hopefully realize how high leverage your AI skill set can be. Because becoming superhuman with AI isn't about the next breakthrough. All the tools already exist. You just need to know how to use them. So this is our brief agenda that we have today. We want to look at voice first everything, then visual thinking. This is going to be foundational for all kinds of things that you'll do, whether it's vibe coding or just trying to get your message across that much better. And then we'll look at template intelligence, MCP integration, pseudo-automations, vibe coding, of course, and finally the holy grail, which I like to call ultra digital independence. And again, my goal is not just to talk about the thing, it's to show you the thing in action. So when it comes to voice first everything, it all comes down to how quickly can you alleviate one of the hardest things to do, which is going from manual typing to dictating every single thing on your mind. To a handful of you, this has been a no-brainer and you've actively been using it for months. But for many of you, you might not know that all you have to do to dictate anywhere there's a text box is use one of these apps or many others that exist now on the market, where all you have to do is click on FN, and you can speak like this, and you can brain dump whatever you want, and this will make your prompt engineering process that much easier. Because when you use your voice, you can say things on your mind that are harder to articulate via typing, because when we type, we filter out thoughts and we focus on the distilled version or the vague version of those thoughts. So we don't get the nitty-gritty details that will help a language model, which is what all of this AI is, to better predict what we want. Exhibit A. And this is going to basically take what I said there. And yes, if you're using ChatGPT, then you could definitely use their voice feature. And it's great. It's using Whisper behind the scenes. But what do you do when it's your Gmail? What do you do when it's a vibe-coded app? What do you do when it's a SaaS tool that doesn't have internal dictation enabled? And when it comes to something as simple as pronouncing names of colleagues, community members, or clients, a lot of these tools will learn the difficult ways to pronounce very unique names over time. And if we take a peek at just one of them, which is WhisperFlow here, you can enable things like system settings where it's always waiting for you. It's always floating at the very bottom if I ever want to click to start dictating. I can go to a vibe coding panel where specifically here I can enable things like variable recognition in cursor or windsurf. So you can use it for all kinds of things. And you even have experimental modes and the ability to personalize things. So if you wanted to auto format your dictation for an email and just send it over, you can. If you want the person receiving that email to know that you actually dictated this instead of typed it, then you can allow that as well. And the core goal with any of these tools is just to open brand new neural pathways that otherwise might not be enabled if you just typed out whatever you're trying to write. And what becomes even more high leverage is that if you have the same types of things you're dictating over time, or you remember that you talked for 4 minutes and context dump a ton of things a week ago, you can always go back in history and retrieve not only that dictation, but also the sound bites associated with it. And this next category is one of my favorites, which is called visual thinking. And the core goal of both of the tools or techniques I'm going to show you today is that you stop just sending a wall of text, of brain dump to either your colleagues, your partners, whoever you're working with, and just asking them, does that make sense? And then they feel socially obliged to nod their heads and say yes, even though all they listened was the very beginning and the very end and nothing in between. And other times, what you think you're saying, you're not actually saying, and the only way to determine that is to visually see it laid out in front of you. So we have a mermaid diagram as well as something called ASCII art. Now the concept of ASCII art might look a bit weird to you, but I'm going to show you a very unique use case of using this to create mental models as well as create actual Miro boards to break down concepts in a way that you can start to go from planning an idea and how you're going to explain it to a client, your team, others in a very short amount of time. And these will help you with system architectures, process flows, decision trees, and learning paths. So let's try out a mermaid diagram. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to explain how I walk through this entire concept of this video into a diagram, okay? So I'm going to use WhisperFlow and I'm just going to dictate. Okay, so I'm going through this video where I'm walking through 5 or 6 different categories. We're going through voice first everything, visual thinking, template intelligence, MCP integration, pseudo-automations, vibe coding, and ultra digital independence. And just to give you an idea or my mental model, voice first means using dictation, which is a high leverage asset because you can use it with prompt engineering, creating workflow diagrams, mermaid diagrams, ASCII art. We can use template intelligence for things like custom GPTs in projects, and we can use MCP integrations to make it easier to connect to backend services we know and love. And then you can dip your toes into automations and hooking those up to the tools I mentioned before. And then we can get into vibe coding, where you build software very quickly. And then you can use something like a Claude Code to put everything together and skip everything I mentioned or combine it all together. Create a mermaid diagram to summarize the entire concept of this video. Now that was a mouthful, I know, but it's going to take that concept, break it down into this pseudocode that will render automatically, if you're using Claude, into an actual diagram that you can interact with. And you can see here it comes up with a workflow diagram to go through a lot of the concepts I just said willy-nilly, and I could go back and forth to make this a lot more refined. But you could use it for concepts as easy as the following. I'm working with a client who's in the pharmaceutical space. They want to see how AI and automation could help them. They're a pharmacist. They run a mom and pop pharmacy in Toronto, Canada. What might their process look like so I can better gauge where I can help them as an AI consultant in their process? And maybe in the diagram, you can place where it might make sense to use something like N8N or Make.com or Zapier. And this is where you can start to get real high leverage over your time. All right, and one thing I forgot to add was create a mermaid diagram and render in an artifact if you're using Claude. If you use ChatGPT, it will just generate the pseudocode that you can copy paste into something that's called Mermaid.live, and then you can just paste it here and you'll get a diagram that looks very similar to this. On our side, it put together this web page that has a legend for all the opportunities where you can use things like automation. And if you zoom in, you can see that it maps out what a mental model process might look like for this mom and pop pharmacy. From prescriptions to safety issues to stock, and even the actual mermaid diagram is color coded for where the opportunities might lie for automation. Not to even mention the little insights at the bottom. So using your voice, using mermaid diagrams in under 5-10 seconds can lead to a lot of discovery that you can avoid having to do manually. So some of you might already know how to use mermaid diagrams, but do you know how to use ASCII art? Let me show you an example. Okay, so I'm trying to explain how language models work at the very bare bones, how you put in an input prompt and the language model processes that prompt and breaks it down to predict the next word or next token that it should output based on the input. Can you use ASCII art design to create a 7 or 8 section Miro board where I can basically use that to teach a series of clients who are in the real estate space how to leverage this technology, but understanding how it's actually broken down and what the foundation is. And if I send that over, it should be smart enough to actually render little code blocks that don't have a fish like you would have seen on this other screen right here, but have actual designs of what each section would look like and maybe what you would write so that it would fit perfectly in something like a Lucid chart, like a Miro board, like an Excalidraw. So even though this looks like something out of a early 2000s video game, you can see it actually breaks down what you would put in all these sections to break down this concept. So it makes it into bite-sized pieces in a way that anyone can understand, and it's obviously optimized for the audience I asked for. From context understanding to pattern matching to probability calculation. So instead of creating slides or slide decks that are so boring and static, you can use this to help you come up with not just insights, but also the design of the board. And all you'd have to do is go add some stickies, add some labels, follow the general structure, and it will help you have a better conversation with whoever you're trying to teach. You can basically use this as your personal whiteboard with doodling. All right, for the next section, it's all about template intelligence. And this one isn't rocket science, but a lot of people just don't do it. So the goal is to use custom GPTs and Claude projects, but more importantly, know when it's time to use them. And let's say I wanted this Claude project to be super nimble. So if I just said something like restaurant or pizza place, it would be able to understand those words and make a mermaid diagram now every single time. But also make sure that we don't have a web page with a diagram, but just to provide us the diagram itself. So in this case, we can pair creating the template with reverse meta prompting. And based on this conversation, I can say, okay, I want you to act as a prompt engineer, go back through our conversation, and we had a bit of a confusion. You rendered a web page along with the mermaid diagram. All I wanted was the mermaid diagram itself. So can you create a prompt as if you're a world-class prompt engineer that would allow me just to put a specific business or a specific concept, and it would automatically understand to create just a mermaid diagram and render just a mermaid diagram, not with any HTML, nothing fancy, mapping out exactly what that process might look like. So now I'll add one more statement usually, which is an output in a code block, but in this case it's all good. I will just let it run and we'll copy paste the prompt and put it into a Claude project. And look at that, it's smart enough to remember that I like code blocks. So if we take this and we open a brand new Claude project, and we just call this Mermaid, all caps, and then we go to instructions right here. Most people just end it right here where they have accomplished the goal and they never revisit it. But the goal is not just to document your patterns and reverse engineer, but also train to perfection. So what I will do for the coming days to maybe weeks, depending on what it is I'll have this Claude project open along with the prior tab we had open, and I'll basically report back and forth. I gave this request to that Claude project with the prompt that you made. This was the output, and this is what it was missing. Go and reorient that prompt. Then I'll go paste that prompt, put it back in the Claude project until I get to a point where it's almost perfect. And this is very helpful with things like email, like social posts, anywhere where content creation needs some form of your voice and you want to remove the AI slop incrementally over time. It's a very helpful technique to go back and forth in this feedback loop. And typically, by week 3 and 4, you have either a custom GPT project or a Claude project that is killer. And this is a good exhibit A, where I just entered the word Indonesian restaurant. It did map out the process, but when I go to actually copy paste it into Mermaid.live, I get this weird syntax error. So now I need feedback, right? So I keep that chat open and I say, let's go back to here. Okay, so while it outputted the mermaid diagram, it was having some weird syntax issues. We need to make sure that the mermaid diagram that we generate never has any form of weird special characters. And here's an example of one error. I don't want any errors whatsoever. So output an adjusted version of that prompt that will make this never happen again. So I'll paste this, and I'll put error, and I'll paste it right here, okay? And then it should come up with an additional prompt that when I re-enter Indonesian restaurant should be much better. And on the second try, it works perfectly, and I just take this, copy it over, and we go into this Mermaid.live, and you can see we have this workflow that walks through the entire reservation process, from drinks to food orders, etc. After you have a few projects or custom GPTs, and you want to go to the next level, this is where you can start layering on MCP servers, which add that much more leverage. Where if you're not familiar or haven't used them before, they're basically connectors that you can hook up a Claude project, in this case, very easily to connect to all kinds of services that you use every day. So in this Claude project, if you go to here and you click on connectors and you go to manage connectors, this is not only where you can see the common connectors, but you can browse special ones that have access to all kinds of platforms, from Monday.com to Netlify and Sentry and Square. And what's cool is a lot of people don't realize that they keep adding almost on a monthly basis brand new connections, as well as desktop connections, especially on a Mac, where I can start to send things to my iMessage, to my MCP server on my local desktop, to Figma, to all kinds of things. Even your Spotify playlist, you could do some AI magic with that. Which leads us to the next section, which are pseudo-automations. And the one I want to focus on are custom GPTs, because they can allow you to hook up to things like N8N and Make.com really easily and execute entire workflows just from a single prompt. So if we take this example GPT I put together, and we go behind the curtain right here, and we go to Edit GPT, you'll see that we have a prompt here that allows us to go from a request to create a calendar event, search calendar events, or send emails. We have some additional information on what's needed to execute that. But more importantly, and the part where you get more leverage over your time, is when you go to this custom actions section, where you create a new action. You can click on this settings right here, and you see we have a series of code. Did I write any of this code whatsoever? No. All I did was go to Perplexity and say, can you create an OpenAI schema for this N8N workflow that I want to hook up to? And this is said workflow. Pretty straightforward. We have a webhook on the left-hand side that allows it to listen in for data from the GPT, It will process it in the AI agent that has a very basic prompt that just says you are a helpful assistant that can manage events and send emails. When creating calendar events, extract relevant details from the user input. And when it receives that data from the custom GPT here in the body, as well as any metadata like the time zone, priority, and the source, and once it has that initial information, it can go and invoke whatever tools it has at its disposal, which are pretty straightforward and predictable here, which are calendar events or sending an email. And then we just send it back to the custom GPT using this webhook response. But in terms of setting this up, this took me 5 minutes. If you're newer to Anyden, it might take you 30 minutes. But the end result is we can go to something like this, and I can ask it, can you go and see what my schedule looks like tomorrow, September the 8th, it's 2025, and tell me what you get back as a response. And if I send that over, it should ask me permission, or in this case, it might not. Let's see. And initially, the first time, it didn't work because it said 20:2025, so it got confused with the date. But after I fixed it, we immediately got this response from the workflow that checked my calendar and said I have a builders meeting for my community tomorrow at 7 to 8 p.m. And behind the scenes, you can see in executions, it ran perfectly. If we click on this succeeded right here, and if we double click on this webhook trigger, you can see we got all of this metadata, but all we cared about was this, which is search my calendar for events on September 9th, 2025. And while this is not one, new, two, groundbreaking, if you are still in the game where you're newer to the concept of adding automations or dipping your toes to see where automations make sense, this is a great gateway drug, both on this as well as MCP servers on the Claude project side to get you to the next level. Because you can imagine that with this workflow, we only have 3 tools. What if you had 6 tools? What if you had an agent and a sub-agent that reports to it, and you add tools to that as well? You can start to make this a higher leverage operation as long as you just have the webhook trigger with data that's reliable, and you send it back exactly where it came from. On the vibe coding side, I covered that so much on the channel, so I won't show you a demo of vibe coding, but it's more so the concept in this case of not renting your software, just trying to rebuild it. So if it's for internal use, I've basically replaced 5 or 10 tools that I used to pay for by just having any one of these tools you see on the screen or others rebuild it, not in seconds, but maybe in an hour or two with enough work, and it was more than enough for my personal use. And this last category is really where I see a lot of leverage and the ability to become superhuman. Because in this world of Claude Code, you can replace all kinds of tools, including custom GPTs and ChatGPT projects, and even Claude projects themselves. And most folks think that you can only use Claude Code for things like coding or vibe coding. But in reality, you can use it for things like creating newsletters, briefs, brain dumps, having become your second brain, using analysis and intelligence, and creative work on all spectrums. And instead of just yapping about it, let me show you one example to leave you with. So this is an example of a chat that I created where I wanted to emulate a custom GPT. So all I did was upload some documents, in this case these documents helping me prepare for my YouTube videos and storytelling and tips and tricks on how I should structure the beginning and end. So I stored both of these files here as markdown files, created a folder called custom GPT, and then I asked Claude to create a script that will allow me to get a report every single day that analyzes my handle of my YouTube channel to give me a report of how I'm doing analytics-wise, as well as some recommendations on what I can do in the future. You can see here it creates a cron job, which basically allows it to run every day. It's the same thing as having a trigger in make.com or Anyden, and then drafts pretty much all the code it needs, and it just tells me where my intervention is needed, which is to go and set up the credentials right here for an email server, password, and then if I want Reddit or some news API key to go search the web, or I can tell it use Perplexity or whatever. But the main idea is, instead of setting up an end-to-end workflow or using a custom GPT and hooking up an automation to that custom GPT, or using an MCP server with a Claude project and hitting walls consistently, you can have one command here that takes us to 80%. And I can tell you, as someone who sees others in my community every day use Claude Code without a technical background, within 30 minutes, you could have something up and running, and you can have a pseudo Claude project that's way more powerful because you can hook up 10 MCPs, 20 MCPs, you can have 100 files in here, you can change the model whenever you want, you have a lot more flexibility, and you can create folders within folders. You have so much functionality, and you can create all of these sub workflows where This is the Python file for the daily report. This is the job that will send the trigger every single day. And then I can intervene at any point in time and know exactly what's in my knowledge base. And this is just a small bite-sized example of how you can use Claude Code. I've been covering it almost every other day in my community, trying out brand new applications, whether it's brand new vibe-coded apps or hooking up to a Supabase server or hooking it up to different services that I didn't even imagine before. So the goal with all this is to get you to the next level, to get you closer to becoming superhuman. So in stages 1 to 2, maybe you could save 8 to 12 hours. 3 to 4, that's where you can start to get real leverage over your time, 20 to 25 hours. And then once you ascend to stage 5 and stage 6, that's where you start to really compound that time saved from dictating to communicating in diagrams instead of just words and walls of text, to adding different functionalities and automations, to then automating those automations by using Claude Code to write code for you and to have you in the middle just as the back and forth conduit between what's happening on the back end. And I could probably spend a whole masterclass, 2-3 hours walking through each and every single thing I do with all of these tools to make me that much more productive. But for this little snippet, this will give you more than enough to get you started, or at least ruminating on what might be missing from your workflow to take you to the next level. If you enjoyed this video, let me know down in the comments below. And if you want to see more tips and tricks and productivity hacks that you can use practically every single day, check out the first link in the description below. I'll see you in the next one.